going.
Welcome to Chat with Nomads, where we uncover travel insights, business advice, adventure stories, and lifestyle tips with world travelers and digital nomads. Here is your host, Rax, from nomadsunveiled.com.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Chat with Nomads. Very happy to have with us today Thilini from Wijesinhe. Hi Thilini, how are you doing?
Hi, nice to meet you all. I'm fine. Thank you. And thank you for the invitation.
Thanks for taking time out to come on. I'm very excited to talk to you because I've heard a bit about your story and I'm just interested to know more actually, especially when you transited from the finance industry, which is quite a lucrative industry, and decided to go nomadic. So why don't you start by giving an introduction of yourself and your background? Because I know that the history probably play a lot of part in what you're doing now in the future as well.
Sure. So I'm originally from Sri Lanka. So I grew up there, studied, and started my financial career there. I also had somewhat a challenging childhood and youth, including losing both my parents. So eventually my financial career became somewhat lucrative and I had a lot of problems parallelly in my personal life. And then I immigrated to Australia through the skilled immigration program and continued my financial career in, of course, different roles. And somewhere around 2018, I felt like, the money is good, but I want to see and do more in life. So at the time, my partner was living in Texas. So we thought, we'll leave our full-time jobs behind and go traveling and use Mexico as a base. If not now, when? kind of thing. So that's how it started.
What actually really got you into suddenly thinking of wanting to become a digital nomad? Because judging from what you were saying just now or what I have seen you write about is your childhood didn't begin with a lot of traveling and stuff like that, right? It was really more of Sri Lanka and then Australia. So you're always at a certain place, right? And after that, you managed to build a very good career for yourself. So there is definitely, I can imagine there's a leap of faith to decide to quit everything and just leave, right? So what kind of triggered the wanderlust and what gave you the courage to actually do so?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, I faced challenges, loss, death early on in life. So I, in a way, understood that life is fragile and finite. If you want something, you gotta go for it. And like you said, I didn't grow up traveling. I started traveling as an adult. I made my first overseas trip when I was like 21. And then once I moved I did travel a bit in Sri Lanka when my career became somewhat lucrative. But after I moved to Australia, I started traveling extensively because I think in Australia we also have a little more annual leave than some places. But it was always, within a certain number of days, within a certain number of vacation days, or I had to get no pay leave and so on. So then I thought, at the time when I was talking to my partner, we had reached a stage where we were somewhat financially stable. We had no other obligations. And we thought, in 50 years from now, if we are still around, would we regret doing it or not doing it? So the answer was quite obvious.
Got it. That makes sense. Was there a target places to go or like to go around the world or to visit certain continents, or was it just free and easy?
Yes, so what we thought was not to nomad fully. We wanted to use a base. So we picked Mexico as a base. Actually, my partner was born in Mexico and it was also fairly easy for me to get a temporary residency. So we first used the Pacific coast for 6 months and then we were traveling. We were also exploring locally. Then we gave up that base and went just traveling for a couple of months. And then we came back. We did a road trip across the country towards the Yucatan Peninsula, and then we stayed here, and then the pandemic happened. So since then, we've been here.
Got it. But you have been to Europe and stuff as well, right? Because I've seen some of your posts. You've been to Europe and the States and also and South America as well, I think, right? Because I saw your photos from Iguazu Falls.
Yes, so actually, after we moved to Mexico, we started with South America and Central America, and then we went to Europe. And the US pictures are actually from before that, before I came over here. So I've been to the US several times, so I decided to put that on hold and now go elsewhere.
Got it. I'm just curious, how do you meet your partner? Because you say he was from Texas and you were at Sydney,
Oh
I
yeah,
imagine.
first it was online, not through a dating site, but through something else.
Oh,
And
interesting.
then then we met in person, and we were on the same page. So we had the same goals, same values. So it
That's
was easy.
that's cool. But do you guys have to do long distance or was it?
Yes, we did long distance. I mean, it's the longest possible distance you can imagine, Texas to
Yeah.
Sydney. The next one is the moon, I think. The next one.
Okay, wait. This is kind of out of topic, but it's interesting because I mean, for a lot of nomads, maintaining relationships are difficult. If you have seen
Yeah.
in a group post, there's always this thing about, hey, we can't find like relationships and stuff. But of course, you were nomading at that time in particular, but still being able to maintain long distance, literally halfway across the world. What are some secret tips that you actually have to make it work?
Yeah, so at the time we were still employed. We both had full-time jobs, so we had our permanent basis. The funny part was that the time difference was completely off, between Sydney and Texas. So one person had to stay late and sacrifice sleep if we had to talk. So I think it's just that, I mean, obviously you can't talk all the time. So you gotta, have a certain allocated time in the evening or morning or plus some short call in between. And also, you got to have other interests because if your whole life is revolving around the relationship, then it's very difficult in that kind of situations. You got to have your own hobbies, own independence, own friends. And so I think it's a balance between the two. And I think what's most important is you got to have an end date. Because you can't do long distance forever.
Oh,
There
yeah.
has to be a day that after such a day is going to end, kind of.
Oh, so was the trip kind of the end date? Did you guys say, for example, okay, 2 years
Yes,
later, we'll go travel around the world together, and that
yes.
is when, oh, that's interesting. That's
Yeah, it wasn't
interesting.
actually. We decided to travel about. It was quite quick. About 6 months before the travel date, we realized that's the day we are gonna travel. So we met at the Dallas airport and then came here on the same flight.
That's nice. So you guys, you didn't even go to Mexico together. You basically met in Mexico. Like you flew from Sydney and you came from the States.
Yes, we met in Dallas. We met at the Dallas airport, literally. I
Ah,
was transiting, and then we came here.
that's cool. So I got the impression that when you guys decide to travel, it was never a work and travel thing. It was actually to basically quit your jobs and just travel, right?
Yes.
And what made it, because now you are a writer, so you have to work instead. So was there ever a transition between, hey, we're just going to travel and not
Yes.
work, to let's make it like a lifestyle, like more nomadic lifestyle, whereby this can actually
Yes.
go on forever if we want to?
Yes. So first we were planning to take like a year or two off and just travel and then possibly go back to work or something like that. So which was our plan when we had met before we were thinking on those lines. Then after a year of traveling, we didn't travel the whole year. I mean, we were in Mexico and we were just doing short trips basically. So the pandemic happened, and then we had to decide, wow, are we going back or staying here, kind of thing, or rather for me especially, am I going back to Sydney or staying? So we decided that we like this flexibility and the freedom, and maybe let's just try to see what we can do, use our skills, and see what we can do. And then the following few months I had some anxiety and I was struggling a little bit, but after that I thought, let me see what my hobbies are and focus on those things. So that's how it got started. And of course now it's great because we get to do what we love and also travel within the restrictions.
I'm curious about something because, and this probably relates to your travel style or something of that sort. Because if you're planning, if your initial plan was just to take a gap year and travel freely, right?
Yeah.
Why was there an idea of having to have a base? Because I reckon as a gap year, you can basically just keep going all over the place, right?
Correct.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
wasn't really a need for a base somewhere, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, we had like a moving base. So the
Okay.
reason, yeah, the reason was that I didn't want to get exhausted or get too tired traveling constantly and having to, carry luggages around or, backpack throughout. So I thought I also was very curious about Mexico and integrating into the lifestyle and explore thoroughly locally and learn Spanish and all that. So I thought those things also to volunteer and do community work. So I thought it would be helpful to have a base. And Mexico worked perfectly because of its geographic location, close to South America and also to Europe. And so it worked. That was the reason.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting because so you were kind of hoping to get both experiences, one of a bit more of expat life in Mexico and also
Yes.
the traveling life around the American
Yes.
continent mostly. And you're saying it's a good base to go to Europe and stuff, which is,
So, yes, so the plan eventually turned to be more location independent work and less of digital nomad. So, location independent means we don't really have to travel. We can travel if we want to. So, I prefer that aspect, I think.
got it, got it. And I'm sure and I think you mentioned a bit on some of the writings you did, whereby when you decided to just quit your job and leave for a year, there were definitely some not so encouraging feedback. I'm assuming people will probably be saying, "What are you doing?" Especially, I'm not sure if most of your friends were from Australia or from Sri Lanka, but this kind of mentality is obviously not as popular in Asia, whereby it's more common to just work your ass off and keep going. So, how was the response, and how did you cope with it?
Yes, so I had seen others do it before me. One girl actually was a Sri Lankan. She's currently living in Singapore. I saw her do that, go backpacking in Singapore. Sorry, in South America. And then I've seen other people do it in Australia. My colleagues and friends in Australia thought it was a really great, cool idea, and my bosses wished they could do it too, but they couldn't because they had certain other obligations. There were a couple of people who were concerned. I mean, I think sometimes the concern is also genuine, like, do you have enough savings? Are you sure you're doing the right thing? Like, what if, oh my God, it's like these things happen, is Mexico safe? Like, those are the typical questions.
Yep.
So, but generally speaking, I think the response was positive. There were some opinions, but I learned very young to not care too much about what other people think because, you got to do what works for you. Life's too short. And I must say this, I had an older colleague who told me this before I left, and I remember it. I remember it forever. He said, opportunities come in small windows. You got to take them because then they're gone. So, so just don't miss. He said 1 or 2 years is such a small time considering the human lifespan. So just go for it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Especially, I mean, if the initial plan was just to do 1 or 2 years. And
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, and one of the thing about traveling, even though I've traveled quite extensively, there's always a regret that even when I was younger, I didn't do more because of the concern about finances and stuff, right?
Yes.
But now if
Yes.
you ask me, I mean, time is the only thing that's the most precious and that we don't own actually, right? So
Exactly.
I think there are some things that you can only do when you have the energy or when you're young. And when it
Exactly.
gets older, it just gets harder to do it.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, we were both in our 30s, but we were still, young and fit enough
Yeah.
to do the things that we wanted to. And we also had a little more resources than we did in our 20s or the teens. So, we didn't have to do the complete budget travel. We could travel a little more comfortably.
For sure, for sure. But also, I think the age where you travel and kind of also the budget where you travel, the experiences tend to vary. For example, if you ask me if I would do the same style of travel I did when I was in my early 20s, I'd probably be like, probably not. Like, I probably don't have the energy to endure that kind of stuff anymore. But I'm glad I did it because I know that I wouldn't do it now. So at least I had the experience previously,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Speaking of which, did you guys, because the plan was never to work and travel, right? Did you guys have a budget in mind that you pre-planned before leaving?
Roughly, but nothing specific. I mean, we thought we had enough money to not work for 2 years or even a little further on. And of course, Mexico is a low cost location, so money goes further on. So we did, but we didn't perhaps have as strict budget, but we were also somewhat careful. Like we didn't, for example, go to really expensive restaurants and splash on money, but instead we stayed in mid-range hotels instead of backpacker hostels. And a couple of times we rented cars when we traveled. And here in Mexico, we got a car for ourselves for road trips. So we kind of prioritized how to spend money based on our likings and requirements. Obviously, it will change based on each individual. I know some people love to spend money on food, but
Got it. And how's your typical travel style like? Do you guys go for, because you have a base in Mexico, right? Do you guys go for a few months or a few weeks and then fly back? Or do you maybe, for example, fly to Brazil and then do 4 months of the whole South America and then fly back?
yeah, actually, a mix. I think first when we were on the Pacific coast, we did short trips like 3 weeks, 2 weeks. And then we left that base and then went traveling for almost 2 months, I think close to 2 months. And then we came back and we came here and then we did much more shorter trips, like to Cuba, to Belize,
Got it.
few
Got it.
days. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. So now we go interstate, few days here and there. It's like that.
Yeah. The pandemic is getting, but Mexico is actually quite open during the pandemic, right? I see a lot of nomads, especially in Merida.
Yes, everybody's here because it's open. I mean, there are restrictions, not as bad as last year, but we can travel. So what we choose to go to outdoor places and pyramids and jungles and things like that.
Yep.
We don't really go to very crowded places like restaurants and bars and stuff, given the situation, and especially because we are still not vaccinated.
Got it. And so,
So I think irresponsible because there are the high risk people out there, even if we are going to be okay, I don't think we should.
for sure, I think nature places are kind of better for the mindset as well, especially when
Yeah.
you're staying in the city, right? I do want to go into nature. A couple of, like almost a month ago, I went to a nearby nature place, just like a 30 minutes drive from Buenos Aires. And it was so different because I've been stuck in the city for so long, and really going into a more natural place really had a different, like I've been there before, but I didn't felt as immersed in the greenery compared to when I went there this time around. Yeah. So that's kind of good as well. Yeah. So did you only get into writing during the pandemic, I imagine, because that seems like a good time to start?
Yeah, so I used to like to write. I mean, it was just, I used to like to write in a journal, basically. So then I thought, okay, I mean, I have some financial background and some technical knowledge. Maybe I could just start writing. So I offered my services directly to a few people, and they were like, yeah, okay, sure, send us some work. And so it got started like that. And so now, of course, I'm also kind of working on a couple of other ideas. But so it was basically a hobby that I was able to monetize.
And what's your partner doing now then?
Yes, so he also is working on one of his hobbies, which he has also monetized, and he's also working on a couple of other ideas as of now.
Ah, that's nice. So the pandemic kind of gave you guys an opportunity to basically pursue certain passions that, you were too busy for.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That was exactly the point, because formerly I was just too caught up in my daily life, and ideally, I know I tell others that, to get started in your businesses before you quit the job, that is the ideal way, the less risky way. But for me, I think I was just too entangled in daily life that I would have never gotten around to it unless I quit, in my case.
I can imagine, because the finance industry has always been, I mean, it's lucrative, almost like it's a worldwide thing that the industry is lucrative, but it's also known to be quite competitive and busy life, hard to get work-life balance.
Yes. So when I was younger, early on in my career, I used to have long hours and have very stressful jobs. But latterly, actually, I had comfortable job. It was not so stressful. But maybe that was also a reason, because I felt like, oh, I'm perhaps getting a bit bored, or perhaps not living the best life I could, there's more to it. I was thinking, oh, imagine working for 35 more years and then retiring. I mean, wondering what if I had done something else.
That's true. That's true. Then there's this thing that I see from a lot of your writing as well, is that you seem to always have an entrepreneurial mindset. And this is just what I feel from whatever you wrote. There's this feeling that you always have certain things that you want to pursue, but you never really got down to pursuing them. And it's starting to come out from you, whereby you're starting to feel like it's time to go and chase what I really want.
Yes. So what happened was, I wanted to, travel. I wanted to become an entrepreneur, all that. But then, as I said, I lost the only family member I had early on, and then obviously it was just simply not possible. So I put the dreams on hold and continued working and sorting other personal life dramas that I got myself into. So then it went from one to another, and the more you progress in your career, the harder it gets to live, to quit,
Yep.
So I realized that I was, in a way, becoming a prisoner in the money and the things that once upon a time I desired, So now I was earning those things, but then what's the point? So my dreams and all those fun things were kind of falling behind.
Yeah, I'm curious about this. Was finance ever something you were really interested in, or was finance more like a safe choice? Because as you know, especially in Asia, we like to say, okay, go be a lawyer, go be a doctor, go to banks. Yeah, it's always there, right? So, and obviously a jump from, I would say, a finance industry to writing is kind of a distinctive jump, because one is, I would say, more artistic, whereby it's more writing
Yes.
is more driven by emotions and what you feel and thoughts, whereas finance, I assume, is more technical, right? So do you think your real passion was actually in writing and something else, whereas finance was more like...
I think definitely I am entrepreneurial. I am working on a couple other things, and I am always like, in that mindset. But I studied commerce in school, and I liked it. I actually enjoyed it, and I do like financial markets and trading, and watching financial instruments fluctuate and all that. So that was fun. But I think what I didn't like was the structure of 9 to 5 job. The fact that the lack of flexibility, even though I think I probably had more of a flexible job than many others that I know, but there were still so many rules and regulations. You can't just go off tomorrow to Cancun or something. It doesn't work. There are like certain things, but when you're doing location independent work, whether it's trading or writing or any other creative thing, you can just take your laptop and go and work from somewhere.
Got it. And do you care to share a bit about what are some of the new things that you're dabbling with?
Yeah, actually, I did a coaching certification, and I'm doing another one. So it's something I'm considering. I need to develop something on that, and then get more into investing, and perhaps trading is the wrong word, because trading sounds very active. So perhaps a less active form of investing and things like that.
Oh, got it. So also in the finance industry then, because they are tapping on your expertise. That makes sense.
Yes. So, it's not like I hated the finance world. There's no such thing. I just like flexibility and freedom.
Got it. Yeah, that's good, right? Then now you can mix your expertise and your need for freedom together to create a new thing for yourself. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk a bit about, and this is a bit intriguing because I also didn't see a whole lot of information about it, but I thought it probably kind of affects your thinking. Or I feel like it was a really huge growth point for you, whereby you were saying in your young 20s, you were actually like $20,000+ in debt, right? Due to some decisions that you made poorly and stuff, right? So how does that, because I see you did a lot of reflection pieces on those stuff, on like the mindset and how things change. And you also did do some entrepreneurial stuff in your 20s, right? Before you actually go into the finance industry. So maybe tell us more about that.
Yes. So, well, I think I was just young and dumb, and
We all were.
didn't. And also, some partially with circumstances, which is not an excuse. I still should have, I guess, ideally known to handle things better. But hindsight is a wonderful thing, Now I can look back and tell my younger self how I should have done X, Y, Z. But at the time, I didn't have that capacity. So yes, it was very stressful because I was living in Sri Lanka at the time, and my earnings were far less than it was in Sydney, and it was a much weaker currency. So it taught me many things, starting from handling stress. It also highlighted another problem, anxiety that I had. But so I realized that, obviously I can't continue the same way. I had to make some changes and I had to get out of it. And I wasn't planning to spend the next 20 years coming out of the debt. It had to happen quickly. And so I restructured some debt, got a cheaper loan and restructured the more expensive ones. And before leaving Sri Lanka, I was able to get my retirement funds and sell my car. And so I used them, probably perhaps not very wise, but to pay down most of my debt. And then when I went to Sydney, I was employed fairly quickly. So, and then I was earning in a much stronger currency. So after that, it was quite easy to repay the remainder.
Yeah, definitely. I reckon Sydney is a good place because the minimum wage there is quite high, and it's also a place whereby a lot of university students or something that likes to go there for work and travel or for a gap year to make enough allowances for traveling. So that seems like a decent place to.
Yes, I mean, I did have to make sacrifices. Like, even though I was earning enough, I learned to live with flatmates instead of, back home until I had my own place. I learned kind of how to allocate money to do what I like. So I like to travel. So travel was something I splashed on. So other things I learned to manage and just be silly, basically, or be dumb like I was back then.
Everyone makes certain mistakes in their 20s. For me, I always tell my friends that if I were to look back at my 20-year-old self, I'll be like, what the shit are you doing? Like, this is so stupid, right? Yeah, but I guess that's what makes us in the first place, right?
Because us, and I'm pretty sure 10 years from now, I'm probably going to look back and use some of the similar harsh words for some things. Who knows?
That's actually something I'm trying to work on. Now I'm trying to incorporate this mindset whenever I make a decision, whereby I'll think to myself, okay, 10 years later, will my 40 plus self tell my 30 plus self, this is a stupid decision. Why do you do it? So I'm constantly trying to slot in this thought whenever I do a decision making.
Yes, and I learned this, I think, as in every stage of our life, we make our decisions based on the information available to us as at that point, based on our understanding as at that point. So it's sometimes not fair for us to look back later and judge our own self, saying we should have done X, Y, Z. It's not, we are not in the same situation anymore.
Yes.
It's easy to say.
Yes, it's easy to say. That's right. Yeah, that's funny. So do you think this growth in mindset also made it really easy for you to transit out of your job to a nomadic lifestyle? Because you seem to be, I mean, like, you don't appear so, but obviously your history shows that you're kind of a risk taker. You're willing to jump into the deeper hole because you have already been in debt. What can be worse, and you have gotten out of it as well. So, I mean, like, there are definitely people who always say, I want to do this lifestyle, but I'm afraid that if I quit my job and stuff, I can't get the job back and everything. But for you, it seems to be an easy transition. You're just like, I want to do this and stuff. I'll just go and do it.
Yeah, so I think there is always a way. There is always a way. We humans underestimate our potential and our own abilities. So you're right. There are people who tell me, oh, I really want to do this, but, I wish I could do this. So I say, if you really want to do that, and for whatever reasons, if it's not possible, then take steps towards it. I mean, what do you want to be wishing 10 years from now? Also, oh, I wish. There's no point wishing, life just flows by. You just got to do it. And what's the worst? Worst is, like you said, okay, maybe it's going to be difficult to find another job, or maybe it's something else. But, you can always find a way. I mean, there is always a way. So I think it's not as courageous or as risky as it sounds, because especially today we live in an online world. There are so many opportunities as competitive as it is, if you can get a little creative, you can always do something and make some money. But time and opportunities and experiences may not come again. So I think the real risk is not taking those chances, not taking those experiences, because I think that is the real risk of losing the opportunity to have those experiences.
Yeah, that's nice. That's beautiful. I think that really sums up the reason for really hopping onto what you want to do quickly, because like you say, experiences and time are something that we can never take back, right? And in today's era of technology, it's so much easier for you to start something. If you imagine our parents' generation probably never had that opportunity, right? They really were concerned about livelihood. They were concerned about, oh, if I lose the job, what should I do?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas today, as much as you say, it can be competitive in the online world, but the outlets are there, the avenues are there. And if you put in the effort and just try it, and things are moving in a way quicker pace, you can probably get an idea validated in a few months. Whereas in the past, when everything is like physical and brick and mortar, you never know. You probably have to dedicate 2 years of your life to do something to decide if it works.
Yeah, and also this risk. I mean, sometimes risk and change comes whether we like it or not. Like the pandemic came and many things changed. A lot of those so-called steady jobs became unsteady, and a lot of things happened and people had to adjust. There was no choice. So I think we have those same abilities at other times too. Sometimes, and only when we are forced into a situation that we tend to rise up to it.
That's interesting, because I've observed recently, obviously during the pandemic, a lot of businesses closed down.
Yeah,
exactly. But I also realized in the last 6 months, a lot of new businesses came up to take the places. Yeah. Do you also see that in Mexico?
Yes, and also like especially back home in the village I grew up in, where it's really not high tech, not even today. Some people who lost their jobs in factories, like garment factories making clothes, are now stitching masks and doing other kinds of things, because you have to, right? It's not an option. They need to put food on the table, so they have to do something. So in that sense, I think people also back home have started understanding that the stability is not as stable as they thought, the definition of it. And also that life is now, that anything can happen any moment. We could be here today, something can happen tomorrow. So we got to live to the fullest and be joyful now, not wait for something to happen in the future to be joyful.
Yeah, for sure. I think the pandemic especially, even though traveling already has a lot of uncertainty, you already realize that plans will never always work out 100%. But the pandemic stuff is no one expected it. I still remember a few months ago before the pandemic happened, I was still debating like, okay, should I go up to Central America or should I head to Europe and stuff? And I was still like, okay, what are the pros and cons and whatever, right? And then the pandemic hit and I was like, all the time spending deciding this or that is useless. It just made no sense now. I'm stuck anyway.
Yes, and also a lot of things, right, with the tragedies that happen, people kind of also stop to think what really matters. Is it like chasing money and collecting money and all these things, or is it spending time with your loved ones and doing what you love and what matters, kind of?
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely a time of reflection. I think like I also started doing a lot more stuff during this period. So when you shifted from like financial consultant in the industry to a writer and partly a travel and finance writer, is there a big there must be a big difference in the job scope and everything and the working style, right? How is the change, and do you think it was worth it? Because obviously you gave up a huge paycheck to do something yourself, which has a lot of potential, but obviously you need to put in a lot of hard work before it fulfills the potential.
Yeah, so I was actually working in not consulting, but investment analytics and funds management latterly.
Nice.
So I suppose similar, but and it was a very good paycheck, a comfortable 6-figure amount in Australian dollars. And the transition, I think, for me now is that one of the things is that I used to suffer from anxiety. And when you're doing something creative like writing, you really got to focus. So, and I used to be quite a lot distracted at work. I mean, partially that was the job, phones ringing, emails and meetings and this and that and all these other things. And here you got to really, focus because your thoughts aren't flowing. And especially if you're a new writer and you're not some experienced person who can like come up with things. So that was a positive because I learned, or I'm still learning how to handle distraction, how to focus, work on my meditation. And so it helped overall, I think, my well-being, the fact that doing that. Second, I'm not, like I said, I don't, consider money. Perhaps I don't give it the respect it deserves, and which is perhaps not so good. But I won't let it stress me because I think I'll always somehow figure it out. And sometimes, yes, those thoughts do occur, like, oh my God, what if something goes wrong, and what if this happens and that happens. But I think what, there's no point. I made a decision to keep going, and now I just have to keep going and make it work. And what's the worst? Worst coming to us are, I'll do something, but I've had a lot of fun. I have no regrets. I've done everything I wanted to do in life. So I think, well, that's worth the risk.
That's nice. Yeah, I mean, I definitely get you regarding the writing because I also don't come from a writing background. I realize there is a real need to be focused whenever I'm trying to get some stuff down. And I realize I'm way more efficient when I'm in a cafe with just my phone and not my laptop and no internet connection. That's actually my most productive time when I'm writing because there's no other distraction and I can get a piece out in 2 hours maybe. Whereas if I have my laptop and have the internet turned on, then my mind keeps bouncing across different places and it's a really a big
thing. And also the style, actually, this is funny. One of the first pieces I wrote, this lady, she was so kind. She came back and said, "Hey, Thilini, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but your article sounds like a financial report." Well, that's true. I mean, that's what I've been doing all my life, right? And then I realized, I have to change. I have to chill out and relax and tone down and, write things that people want to read because financial reports are considered a little boring. Nobody wants to read.
That's interesting. Yeah, but isn't that your style? Can't you tweak it to make it a unique style of yours?
Yeah, so I mean, I just learned to, chill out and just write in simple language and drop the big words I used in wallpapers and stuff like that, So just see how it goes and just take it as it comes because I think it's a process, right? We learn as we go. Every month we realize, we are a little better or a little improved or faster or slower, so there's a progress. So.
Yeah, that's definitely what I'm hoping for because I'm taking way too much time writing to churn out a piece of thing. And I've always been, the only encouragement I always tell myself is that this is going to get better and more efficient the more I write. Yeah, but it's definitely a kind of a pain because obviously I'm faster at doing other stuff that I'm good at. And those are the so-called money makers, right? So whenever you put something into, especially when writing and you're not submitting an article, let's say you're just doing content creation, the return on investment don't come immediately, right? You're just looking at a piece of thing that's going to be helpful and hopefully down the road it builds your content arsenal, right? Yeah. So it's always
and sometimes the return on investment is so little financially, when you're getting started. And also, I find that sometimes there's information overload in the internet. So, there are so many things. You got to kind of cut the noise and, I guess, become humbled and start from the beginning and keep going.
Yeah, that's true. So these days, I'm always looking more at using the market feedback on questions that people are asking to drive the topic that I'm writing because then I know that there's an immediate need for it. So then that's more interesting because sometimes when you're just writing blindly, I mean, you might enjoy writing it and it's fun and I kind of think there's always a need for something, but it's so hard to gauge, right? When people are really already asking the question, it's easy because now then I know that there's an audience that really needs the info and whatever I write can really help someone. Yeah. Another interesting thing to talk about is obviously about travel. I mean, your life has already changed quite a bit, so that definitely changed your perspective. But do you think there anything specific whereby travel actually changed your perspective on as you go to see different cultures, the different way of living?
Yes, I learned so many things from traveling. One is that we as humans are not as different as society has made us think. Because every country you go to, people have the same complaints, the same wants, the same needs, the same things, same problems at different scales. So in a way, it's kind of, I found it very endearing that we are all so similar, and it's kind of nice. You can connect people, and because media portrays things very differently to what you see on the ground. An example is Mexico. so it's so I found it very eye opening, and I also learned that people back home, or people that we know, they also move on with their lives. So they are not saying they are waiting for us to give updates or for us to come back from wherever we are. We can't expect that.
Yeah.
So that's another thing I love, that we got to, kind of run our own races, and people move on, and sometimes friends move on, and it's just life. And another one of the things I learned was, I guess, to just and appreciate every moment, and like especially being in front of nature, like Iguazu Falls, really humbles you. It makes you feel that, oh, you're just this tiny speck of thing in this vast universe. So what are all these problems and anxieties and worries? I mean, just being, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting because I also felt a lot of that when I'm in nature, and I think one of the defining moments, Iguazu Falls was obviously kind of a big time because
Yeah.
like it's so impactful there, and you just realize that the nature is so vast, right? And
Awful, yeah.
yeah, and I was lucky enough to be kayaking in Antarctica, and that was when like it was really quiet, but
Yeah.
the whole ocean is just vast and just full of white and blue. And you are thinking about like, hey, this like the world is so big. Like I'm just a speck here,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of life problems that.
It puts things in perspective. Obviously, I don't mean to diminish the problems of the world. There are really big problems, but sometimes we also tend to worry about really silly things that we shouldn't.
Yeah, that's what I agree with. I think it's really deploying a second layer of thought when you are like very bogged down by something, right? And you will just wonder like, is this thing really that important? Like to be so sad or to be so negative about it, right? Would 80-year-old me care about what happens right now 40 years ago? And you realize, hey, maybe it's really not that important, right? But obviously, like you say, there are definitely problems that are important as well, and could be lifelong and impactful too.
Yeah. But I think the pandemic also made us and many people realize that we just shouldn't waste time on things that aren't insignificant.
That's true. So just now you were saying about friends back home moving on, right? I'm curious to know, are there anything that you feel like you miss because now that you are in this lifestyle compared to the previous one?
Yes. So, I mean, I keep in touch with my friends, but there are time differences, and people are busy, and they have their lives, their jobs, their families, and so on. So sometimes some people have moved on, and they don't have the time, or or I suppose I don't have the time sometimes to coordinate things. I also learned young to kind of accept that a phase of life ends, and then you go to the next phase of life. There's really no point regretting and lamenting about it. That is just how it is. We go through school, then school is over, and no matter how much we cry about it, we can't go back to high school. So it's just a phase. So it's you just keep going. But I mean, I miss my friends. I miss some of the times we had. But then I look at it like, oh, it was just this beautiful movie, kind of thing, that I had these great times with them, and maybe we'll have more great times in the future after the pandemic. But when we were there, we had the best possible time, and that's what matters the most. So for me, it's like a happy nostalgic memory, while I also miss them. I mean, I think the same about my father. It would have been great if I had him more into my adulthood, and because I grew up with a single father. But we had the time we had, and it's just what it is. It's just life.
That's nice. I'm curious, did you actually consciously think that it was a next phase of life when you decided to quit your job and go on this trip? Was it because for me, I didn't feel that way. Like I wasn't saying, oh, okay, this is going to be a whole new beginning or anything when I started this, right? I always wanted to travel around the world. That was always a goal myself. And when I started doing it, it was also partly because I think the overseas market had a lot of opportunities that I wanted to explore. And it also made a bit of sense because most of my clients were in another time zone. So moving did make sense, right? So I never really view it as, hey, this is another stage. But of course, on hindsight, if I look at it now, I realize that it is actually a transition, right? But because you quit your job, so I think that's a way more impactful thing that's in your life, right? Do you see as a different phase?
Yes, I did. I didn't probably spend as much time contemplating it because I was so busy trying to, do all the errands, like organize everything. It was quite a nightmare while working because I worked till like the day before or 2 days before I left. So it was a lot to do. But yes, I did understand. I thought, I've had so many different episodes in life. Life has created for me. So it's just another next step where it will go. I don't know for sure, but I'm going to enjoy the ride.
So do you actually sell all your stuff back in Sydney or back in Australia, or did you keep some stuff?
Yes, I gave up. Yeah, I sold my car. I was renting. I had a flatmate, so I found somebody else. So the others were just household goods and all that I sold, donated.
So there was no intention or preparation of basically returning anytime soon.
No, there was, but I didn't want to put things on in storage and then keep paying. In hindsight, that was a great decision. Imagine now with the pandemic, and it was just unnecessary. I didn't have any large assets or ties as such. So these small things, you can always start and buy again or whatever if we have to. So
did it also make you realize more like you actually don't need that much stuff in life or material stuff?
Yes, I felt so free, because back in the day I had this shopping problem. I used to buy all these things and I thought they were supposed to make me happy, but they were weighing me down. These things I was working hard to buy were actually more of a baggage than a form of happiness. So when I dropped most of the things I didn't need and packed myself into a few bags, I suddenly felt so free. It was like, oh my God, I'm just free. And it is just the most wonderful thing for someone like me who used to go crazy and in sales and various things.
I definitely see the benefit of not having all this small stuff. And just that, now I'm even sometimes contemplating, it's almost a responsibility and a hassle to have, even like, let's say you buy an asset, right? Like, let's say you do a property investment, which is supposedly a good thing because it's an asset investment.
Yeah.
But now I have the thought like, shit, if I ever get a property, now there's this big thing somewhere, somehow that I have to manage. And then it bogs down on your mind, right? And you no longer have the freedom to be like, I only have my backpack and can go anywhere.
I think investments are good and all that, but I think having less things, especially small things, is also something we should consider from an environmental point of view. Do we need this many high heels? I'm using that example because it's my history. Like when the pandemic happened, how many of us were wearing them at home?
That's true. Even now, my parents are nagging at me because I threw a whole bunch of clothes at the place in the cupboard. Yeah. And they're like, you have this bunch of clothes there now. And I was like, yeah, I actually only need 4 shirts in my life to survive. And that's good enough. So what are plans for you guys coming up? Are you going to stick around in Mexico?
Yes, so now I think that's pretty much our only choice, and I was lucky to have gotten a temporary residency at the time, even though I was just thinking, maybe I should just come on a visit visa, but I just went ahead and got it, and thankfully for that, now I can continue to stay. So I also got the work rights here because the temporary residency doesn't come with work rights. So now I'm free to do whatever I want, and I can file taxes here, so it's really handy. And now the plans are to travel domestically. We have traveled quite a bit locally, but just continue to. And when we are vaccinated, then things open up. Hopefully, we will start going overseas again. But I think I prefer the having a base and location independent work to nomading, because it's also less tiring and gives a little bit of stability. Perhaps is not my favorite word, but comfort.
I get it. It's like the feeling of there's a home somewhere, right?
Somewhere, even if it's not really proper,
Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah. It's a very intangible, hard to describe thing. It's just a feeling that, yeah, I get that. I get that. And so Mexico has been doing well for you guys then. You seem to be enjoying it.
Yeah.
It's like a
I really love it here. There's so much to do and see, from the pyramids to the cenotes, the sinkholes, the beaches, and there's pretty much everything. And the healthcare system is good. And I also was able to learn Spanish. And while I'm not very fluent, I'm semi-fluent, I think. So it's nice. So I mean, it has worked for me. I haven't had any safety incidents. Especially Merida is very safe. Merida is one of the safest places, I think.
Mhm.
But there are obviously areas in the country and states that are considered unsafe. But we haven't personally had any incidents. But people keep always asking, "Oh my God, is it safe? Are you all okay?" It's like it's not as bad as somehow it makes it out to be out there. I mean, not to say that bad things don't happen, they do. I'm not living in denial that perhaps sometimes things get a bit exaggerated in the media.
Yeah, for sure. That is one of the points I've always told people. If you just rely on the media to judge how a country is, it's probably very one-sided. Like you never
Yes.
know. And you really just have to go there and your impression of it will change. And it's usually for the better, because the media just will show, the bad stuff, because those are what captures attention, right? And get people talking, right? So I'm glad you have the same thoughts about it, because that seems to be the general thought for all travelers. People are worrying for like you say, there's a need to take caution everywhere you go, but sometimes
Sure.
the worries are very exaggerated.
And also, you might agree with me, some of the so-called, let's say, the safe places or the first world developed places aren't as safe either.
Yes, totally. I was always telling people that sometimes I don't feel as safe in the States walking around at night compared to other places, just because I've been there a bit, and at night there are some weird people walking about. And then, of course, there's this whole gun thing that is a debate in the States. I mean, I don't get affected very much because I'm not there, but that definitely gives me something to think about as well. So it's hard to determine unless you've been there yourself and really, feel it yourself. So to close off, I think one final question would be if people are looking to go into the lifestyle and they have this very nice job that they are in right now, right? What are some things that you will probably think about before actually quitting your job and leaving? And like, what are some practical considerations?
Yeah, so I'll say have a financial buffer. If you think you're not going to earn for a while, then make sure you have a budget. If not a very specific budget, budgets can be rubbery, they change. Obviously, it's very difficult to arrive at a very conclusive budget, but have a rough financial buffer, so that way you won't get stressed while you're getting started in your business or freelancing. So you don't have to worry about every dollar. You'll have a cushion. And the second I would say is, unlike what I did, if you can, while you're working, get started with your freelancing or your side business. I know sometimes there are compliance rules and it's not allowed depending on what it is, but if it is unrelated, I think that probably wouldn't be a problem. So that way you can get a head start. And the third one I think is that, yeah, all planning and all that is good, but like, do it, think about what will you feel when you're 80, 90 years old, if you're there. Will you look back and think, oh, I wish I did that? Or will you think, oh yeah, I'm glad I stayed? Either is okay, but just don't live in the limbo.
Yeah, that's definitely something to think about before you leave. I mean, regret is probably one of the worst things to have in life.
Yes, and I mean, this life isn't for everyone, and that's okay, just make that choice. And if you want to stay, stay. If you want to go, go. But like, don't, live in that, I wish I could kind of, do one and the other.
Yeah, and it's also definitely okay to try it out first for a bit and
Yes, exactly.
discover that you don't like it, and that's fine. You can just go back to,
That's fine.
whatever. Yeah.
Yes, and also if you want to do that, you could perhaps talk to your bosses and see if they can give you 6 months off or 12 months off. And sometimes you'd be surprised that the answer might be yes, especially in a time like this when you can work from anywhere. And then if that is the case, then if you don't like it, you can go back, or you can just continue to do that job. Or
Do you attempt to ask your boss for a 2-year leave?
no, in Australia, people do take like a year off.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But you didn't. You decided.
I actually checked if that option was available, and not that I was I wasn't counting on it, but I did check if that was available. But I think for my particular role, it was not very wise for them business wise to train somebody else and then get it. In any case, I was planning to quit, but I did check. But I do know others who got 6 months off, and some others in different jobs got a year off, and it's very possible. So some people come back, some people don't come back. But
You obviously don't seem to be going back then.
not right now.
Okay, thank you, Thilini, for joining us today. There was a lot of great insights and experiences.
Thank you so much. Speak soon and take care. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Chat with Nomads. Please remember to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And be sure to share with your friends. Also, we'd love to know what topics you'd like to hear more about. To stay updated on the latest, join us on our mailing list at chatwithnomads.com. You can also find more travel and nomading tips at Nomads Unveiled. That's NOMADsunveiled.com. Start living your dreams today. We'll catch you in the next episode.